15 years of loyalty destroyed in 15 seconds. When the CEO stormed into the conference room, face crimson with rage, his voice shattered the morning calm. "Where is she?" Nobody knew that miles away. She was calmly sipping her coffee, letting the digital bomb she'd planted tick down to zero, ready to devour the company's entire $240 million federal contract portfolio. They'd humiliated her publicly, dismissed her as replaceable. Now they were about to learn that some bridges, once burned, take everything else down with them. My name is Rachel Dawson, and for 15 years, I was the invisible backbone of Northbridge Solutions. Not that anyone would know it from what happened that Monday morning at 9:30 sharp. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee, and Ethan Brooks' excessive cologne, a toxic combination that should have warned me about what was coming. Ethan, our new operations manager, had been with the company for exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of swagger, buzzwords, and that particular brand of Silicon Valley arrogance that makes you want to throw your laptop through a window. "So, Rachel," he began, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. The fluorescent lights caught the gel in his perfectly styled hair. "I've been reviewing your department's processes, and frankly, I'm not impressed." 23 pairs of eyes turned to me. My team, the IT staff, even Sandra from HR, who was only there to take notes. The air conditioning hummed overhead, the only sound in the suddenly Arctic room. "The compliance core system you manage," Ethan continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "is a dinosaur. Legacy code, outdated protocols, zero optimization. Honestly," he paused for effect, a smirk playing at his lips, "an intern could do your job, fresh out of college, half the salary, twice the innovation." The words hung in the air like a challenge. I felt my hands steady on the table, my wedding ring clicking once against the glass surface. 15 years. 15 years of middle-of-the-night emergency calls, of preventing federal audits from destroying us, of being the only person who understood the labyrinthine system that kept our government contracts valid. In fact, Ethan stood up, buttoning his navy blazer with theatrical precision. "I've already put out feelers to a few staffing agencies. We'll have you train your replacement over the next 2 weeks. Consider this your notice." The silence was deafening. Mark from database management actually gasped. Lisa, who'd worked with me since day one, looked like she might cry. But nobody spoke up. Nobody dared. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and calm, reached into my laptop bag, pulled out my access badge, the one with level 5 clearance stamped in red, the highest security level in the company aside from the C-suite. "No need for 2 weeks, I said, my voice steady as granite. I placed the badge on the table with a soft click. "I'm sure your intern will figure it out." Ethan's smirk widened. "See, this is exactly the kind of defeatist attitude we're trying to eliminate. Real innovators don't quit when challenged." I almost laughed. Almost told him about the time I'd saved the company from a $12 million fine by catching a compliance error at 3:45 in the morning. Almost mentioned that the CEO, Jonathan Hale himself, had my personal cell number for emergencies. Almost explained that the compliance core system wasn't just some database, it was a living, breathing entity that required constant attention, intuitive understanding, and most importantly, administrative credentials that took years to properly establish with federal oversight boards. But I didn't. I simply picked up my laptop bag, took one last look at the room full of uncomfortable faces, and walked to the door. "Rachel," Ethan called out, his voice sharp with authority, "you'll need to document all your passwords and processes before you leave the building." I turned at the doorway, meeting his eyes for the first time since his little performance began. "Everything the company needs is in the system," I said. "You just have to know where to look." The door closed behind me with a soft whisper. As I walked past the cubicles, past the kitchen where I'd celebrated 15 birthday parties, past the server room that housed my life's work, I heard Ethan's voice drift through the walls. "See, problem solved. We'll have a new system architect by Friday." If only he knew that the system was already beginning its countdown. 36 hours until the custodian protocol activated. 36 hours until they realize that some problems can't be solved with arrogance and an MBA. I cleaned out my desk in 10 minutes. There wasn't much. Just a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest System Admin," and a photo from the company picnic 5 years ago, back when we still pretended to be a family. Security didn't even escort me out. After 15 years, I'd earned that much respect, at least from the people who mattered. Tom at the front desk simply nodded, his expression grim. "Take care, Rachel," he said quietly. "You too." "Tom," I replied, handing him my parking pass. "You might want to update your resume." He laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. The compliance core system wasn't born. It was cobbled together from digital desperation and federal mandates back in 2009. I was 26 then, fresh from my master's degree, naive enough to think that hard work actually mattered. Northbridge had just landed its first major government contract, $70 million, to provide logistics software to the Department of Defense. The celebration lasted exactly 1 day before reality hit. Nobody understood the compliance requirements. That's where I came in, not as some genius architect, but as the only person willing to spend 18-hour days deciphering federal documentation that read like it was written by lawyers having nervous breakdowns. FISMA, NIST, FedRAMP acronyms that became my entire world. The system I built wasn't elegant. It was a Frankenstein's monster of APIs, authentication protocols, and audit trails held together by determination and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. But it worked. More importantly, it kept us compliant with every single federal regulation, even the ones that contradicted each other. I remember the first crisis vividly. October 2011, 2:17 in the morning. My phone rang. Jonathan Hale, our CEO, his voice tight with panic. "Rachel, we're being audited. The feds are here at 7 a.m. They're saying our encryption protocols don't meet standards. We could lose everything." I drove to the office in my pajamas, spent the next 4 hours rewriting authentication modules, and had everything ready with 15 minutes to spare. The auditors found nothing. Jonathan personally handed me a bonus check that December. "You saved the company," he said. "This system, what you've built, it's our lifeline." Over the years, the compliance core grew like a living organism. Every new contract meant new requirements, new modules, new complexity. I became fluent in its language, not just the code, but the logic behind it, the federal thinking that informed every decision. I knew which authentication server preferred certain timestamp formats, which audit log needed to be purged monthly versus quarterly, which encryption key rotation schedule kept the Pentagon happy. By 2018, we were managing $240 million in federal contracts across 12 agencies. The compliance core handled everything: security clearances, audit trails, contractor verification, budget compliance, progress reporting. It was a symphony of complexity that I conducted daily, sometimes hourly. The irony was that I'd made it look too easy. While other departments had teams of 20, 30 people, I managed everything with just myself and 2 junior administrators who handled routine maintenance. We never had breaches, never failed an audit, never missed a compliance deadline. To executives like Ethan Brooks, smooth operation meant the job was simple. They didn't see the 312 in the morning patches when federal standards changed overnight. They didn't know about the custom scripts I'd written to translate between incompatible government systems. They certainly didn't understand that I'd hard-coded myself as the primary system custodian not out of ego, but because the federal authentication boards required a single point of accountability, a real person with a verified security clearance and established trust relationship. That trust relationship took 5 years to build. 5 years of background checks, polygraph tests, financial audits, and reference verifications. The government didn't just want someone managing the system. They wanted someone they could trust with classified contractor information. My credentials were embedded so deeply in the federal infrastructure that my user ID appeared in databases from the Pentagon to the Treasury Department. The beautiful, terrible truth was that the system couldn't function without a verified custodian. It was like a massive vault that required not just a key, but a handprint, a retinal scan, and a heartbeat. Remove the authorized custodian without proper succession documentation, and the vault would seal itself. Federal Regulation 2018-447, subsection 12. In the absence of a verified system custodian, all access privileges must be suspended pending re-verification through appropriate channels. Those appropriate channels, a minimum 6-month process involving 3 different federal agencies. I tried to explain this once to the previous management team. They'd nodded, filed my documentation, and promptly forgot about it because nothing had ever gone wrong. Why worry about something that worked perfectly? But Ethan Brooks hadn't even bothered to ask. In his mind, I was just another overpriced employee clinging to outdated systems. He saw my quiet competence as complacency, my deep knowledge as resistance to change, my irreplaceable role as a challenge to his authority. The last backup I'd run was 3 days ago, a complete system state saved to my personal secure server, perfectly legal under my custodian agreement, every password, every configuration, every line of custom code that kept Northbridge compliant. It was all there, safe and sound, in case the company ever needed to rebuild. But they'd have to ask nicely, and more importantly, they'd have to admit they needed me. As I sat in my home office that afternoon, looking at 15 years of commendations, certificates, and thank you notes from various department heads, I felt neither anger nor sadness, just a cold clarity. They wanted to see if an intern could do my job. They were about to get a masterclass in the difference between knowing how to code and understanding why the code existed in the first place. The compliance core was about to become their education, and tuition would cost exactly $240 million. My home office was a mirror image of my work setup: 3 monitors, a secure server, and enough processing power to run a small country. Call it paranoia or foresight, but I'd always maintained a parallel system. Every script, every configuration file, every piece of documentation lived here too. Encrypted and air-gapped from any network. The company never knew, never needed to know. It was my insurance policy, though I'd never imagined I'd cash it in like this. The laptop booted with a soft hum. 3:27 p.m., Monday afternoon. The termination had been exactly 6 hours ago. By now, Ethan was probably celebrating with his fellow MBAs, toasting to optimization and lean operations. Let them celebrate. The real show hadn't started yet. I opened the terminal, fingers dancing across the keyboard with muscle memory built over thousands of nights. First, I accessed my secure backup server. Everything was there, pristine and untouched. The entire compliance core architecture laid out like a blueprint. Every connection, every dependency, every federal interface documented in excruciating detail. But I wasn't here to save them. I was here to step aside and let gravity do its work. The fail-safe custodian protocol was my masterpiece of paranoid programming. I'd built it after the 2016 breach at Edifice Corp, when their fired system admin had locked them out completely, causing $40 million in damages. The Federal Oversight Board mandated that all contractors implement a custodian continuity protocol, a way to prevent rogue administrators from holding systems hostage. My solution was elegant. The system would continue to function normally as long as a verified custodian logged in every 36 hours. Miss that window, and it would enter protective mode, all external connections suspended, all processes frozen, waiting for re-verification. It wasn't malicious. It was compliance. Federal Regulation FSC 2019-112 required it. The beautiful irony: I documented this feature extensively, filed it with compliance, sent quarterly reminders to management, even conducted a drill in 2020 where I'd simulated my absence. The system had locked down exactly as designed, and I'd walk them through the recovery process. But that was 3 management teams ago. Institutional memory in corporate America lasted about as long as the quarterly earnings call. I pulled up the custodian console, my credentials still valid for another 30 hours. There it was, my administrative profile, verified by the Department of Defense, the Treasury, the Department of Energy, and 9 other federal agencies. Status active. Time until next required check-in, 47:33. My finger hovered over the keyboard. One command would transfer custodianship to another user. One command would keep their precious contracts flowing. One command would save them from themselves. Instead, I typed something else: custodian privileges revoke, user R. Dawson, effective immediate, reason term voluntary. The system prompted, warning, no alternate custodian detected. Fail-safe protocol will activate in 36 Sazaro. Proceed. Yes. Secondary warning, federal compliance requires custodian transition documentation form C447B. Form not detected in system. Proceed. Yes. Final warning, this action is irreversible without federal re-verification. Estimated re-verification time 180-365 days. Proceed. My finger didn't hesitate. Yes. The screen flashed once. Custodian privileges revoked. Fail-safe protocol activated. Countdown initiated. 58. I leaned back, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was done. I was now just another user in the system, no special access, no ability to stop what I'd started. Even if I wanted to help them, beg them to let me help, I couldn't. My federal credentials were now orphaned, floating in bureaucratic limbo until someone at the Pentagon noticed and started the 6-month re-verification process. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more piece to arrange, one more domino to position. I opened my personal email, not the Northbridge account that had already been deactivated, and composed a message to Sarah Martinez at the Federal Compliance Oversight Board. Dear Sarah, as per federal regulation FSC 2018-447, I am notifying you that my role as primary custodian for Northbridge Solutions Compliance Core System has been terminated effective today. I have properly revoked my credentials as required by protocol. Please note that as of this notification, Northbridge Solutions has not designated a replacement custodian, per your guidelines. I am not responsible for any continuity issues that may arise from the absence of proper succession planning. All my documentation remains with the company. I trust they will follow appropriate procedures for custodian transition. Best regards, Rachel Dawson, former system custodian, Northbridge Solutions. Send. Sarah would read that tomorrow morning, probably around 8:30 when she got to her desk at the Treasury building. She'd immediately flag it in the federal system, which would trigger automated notices to every agency we contracted with. By lunch, there would be 12 different federal departments asking Northbridge for their new custodian credentials. Credentials they didn't have, couldn't have, wouldn't have for months. I closed the laptop and walked to my kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, a 2015 Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. Outside my window, the city hummed with typical Monday evening energy. Traffic, life, the world spinning on, oblivious to the countdown that had just begun in a server room across town. 35 hours and 43 minutes until Northbridge Solutions learned the difference between price and value. Until Ethan Brooks discovered that some things can't be optimized, streamlined, or replaced with eager interns. Until Jonathan Hale understood that when you let someone become irreplaceable, you should probably treat them as such. I raised my glass to the empty room. To 15 years, I said aloud, and to the 36 hours that will undo them all. The wine was perfect complex, layered, with a bite that reminded you it had teeth. Just like a well-designed system, just like a patient woman with root access and nothing left to lose. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy at Northbridge Solutions. I knew this because Lisa, my former teammate, was texting me play-by-play updates despite my requests for radio silence. She couldn't help herself. 15 years of friendship didn't end with a termination letter. Ethan brought in 2 kids. Her text read at 8:45 a.m. Melissa Wang and Tommy Rodriguez, fresh graduates. They looked terrified. I could picture it perfectly. The server room with its precise 68-degree temperature, the hum of cooling fans, the walls of blinking lights that looked impressive unless you knew what they meant. Melissa and Tommy were probably standing there with their brand new laptops, trying to look confident while drowning in imposter syndrome. He told them they have 2 days to modernize everything, Lisa's next text said. Tommy asked for documentation. Ethan said real innovators don't need manuals. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. By 10:15, the first signs appeared. Lisa sent a screenshot from the internal Slack channel. Anyone else seeing custodian undefined errors in the audit logs? Someone from accounting had asked. The responses were predictably dismissive. Just legacy noise, Ethan had replied. Ignore it. Focus on optimization. Custodian undefined. Such a simple phrase. So easy to overlook. The system was asking a fundamental question, who's in charge, and finding no answer. It was slowly, methodically, beginning to protect itself. At 11:30, Melissa discovered my documentation folder, 3,000 pages of meticulously organized procedures, protocols, and explanations. According to Lisa, she'd actually gasped out loud. This is all for one system, she'd asked. Ethan had laughed. See, overcomplicated. That's why we're streamlining. He had them start with what he called quick wins, removing redundant authentication steps, consolidating unnecessary audit trails, deleting obsolete verification protocols. Every change they made was perfectly reasonable from a standard IT perspective. Every change was also another nail in their coffin. The federal systems didn't care about efficiency, they cared about compliance. Each redundant step existed because some agency required it. Each unnecessary audit trail fed into a federal database somewhere. Each obsolete protocol was someone's congressional mandate made digital. By 2 p.m, the Department of Energy's automated system had noticed something was wrong. It sent a routine verification request, a simple handshake that happened every Tuesday. The Compliance Corps received it, processed it, and tried to respond. But without a custodian to sign the response, it could only send back a generic acknowledgement. Request received, awaiting custodian approval. The DOE system waited exactly 1 hour, then escalated. Another request, this time flagged as priority. Same response. By 4 p.m., there were 17 pending verification requests from 6 different agencies. Tommy noticed first. Lisa said he'd gone pale staring at his monitor. Mr. Brooks, he'd said, voice cracking slightly. There are a lot of pending federal requests here. They seem important. Ethan's response was a masterclass in dangerous ignorance. Government systems are always slow. They'll process eventually. Keep focusing on the modernization. But Tommy was smart, dangerously smart for someone so green. He started digging into the logs, tracing the custodian undefined errors back to their source. At 5:23, he founded the fail-safe custodian protocol, buried in subsection 12 of the security documentation. Mr. Brooks, Tommy said, according to Lisa's increasingly frantic texts, this system requires an authorized custodian to function. Without one, it enters protective mode after 36 hours. So authorize yourself, Ethan had snapped, already packing up for the day. I can't. It requires federal verification, multiple agency approvals, security clearances. It says here the process takes 6 months minimum. That's ridiculous. There must be a workaround. Tommy pulled up my documentation, reading directly. No workarounds exist or should be attempted. The custodian protocol is mandated by federal law. Attempting to bypass it constitutes a violation of USC Title 18, Section 1030. The fraud and related activity in connection with computers. Act, federal crime territory. Tommy might have been new, but he wasn't stupid enough to risk federal prison for a job he'd had for 8 hours. Ethan's solution was predictably corporate. We'll escalate to legal tomorrow. For now, just keep the system running. But the system wasn't listening to Ethan Brooks. It was listening to the timer counting down in its core 21 hours, 16 minutes, 43 seconds until full lockdown. As the office emptied that Tuesday evening, Melissa made one last discovery. She found my contact information in the documentation. My personal cell listed as emergency custodian contact. She hesitated, then took a photo of it with her phone. Lisa's final text of the day came at 7:45. Melissa asked me if you'd help if they called. I told her the truth that they publicly humiliated you and said an intern could do your job. She looked like she might cry. I poured myself another glass of wine and turned off my phone. They wanted an intern to do my job. They were getting exactly what they'd asked for, two bright young minds discovering that knowledge and wisdom were different currencies. And they'd just spent all their budget on the wrong one. Outside, a thunderstorm was building. The first drops of rain hit my window as the clock passed 8 p.m., somewhere across the city, in a climate-controlled server room. A counter continued its relentless march toward zero. Wednesday morning brought chaos wrapped in professional panic. I'd turned my phone back on at 6 a.m. to find 47 missed calls and twice as many texts. Not from Northbridge, they were too proud for that yet, but from former colleagues at other companies, all asking variations of the same question. What the hell is happening at your old place? The federal compliance network was smaller than people realized. When a major contractor started failing verification requests, word spread fast. By 7:30, Northbridge's failures were being discussed in hushed tones across Washington, D.C. office buildings. Marcus Hill, the CTO, arrived at the office at 5:45 a.m. according to Lisa's breathless texts. He'd been in Silicon Valley for a conference, caught a red-eye back when the automated alerts started flooding his phone. The synchronization failures weren't just warnings anymore, they were active breaks in the data flow. Marcus looks like death, Lisa wrote. He's been screaming at Ethan for 20 minutes. The problem was elegantly simple and catastrophically complex. Every federal contract required real-time data synchronization with oversight databases. The compliance core handled thousands of these syncs' daily budget updates, progress reports, security validations, personnel changes, without a custodian's signature. Each sync was failing. The data was piling up like cars in a highway accident, each failed transmission causing 3 more behind it. By 8 a.m., Claire Bennett from legal had joined the war room. Claire was sharp, Harvard Law, the kind of person who read federal regulations for fun. It took her exactly 12 minutes to understand the full scope of the disaster. "You fired the only person authorized to run this system," she asked Ethan, her voice deadly quiet. "Lisa said you could hear it through the conference room glass." She was redundant, Ethan defended. "The system should be able to function without a single point of failure." "The federal government is a single point of failure," Claire shot back. "Do you have any idea what FSC 2018-447 means? It's not a suggestion. It's a federal mandate. Without a verified custodian, we're in breach of contract. All of them. Every single federal contract we have." The number hung in the air, $240 million. Meanwhile, the Federal Compliance Oversight Board had received my email and reacted exactly as expected. Sarah Martinez had escalated it to her supervisor, who'd escalated it to the Interagency Compliance Committee. By 9 a.m., Northbridge had received formal notices from 12 different federal departments, all requesting immediate confirmation of their new custodian credentials. Credentials that didn't exist, couldn't exist, not for months. Tommy and Melissa, to their credit, were working frantically to find a solution. They'd spent the entire night reading my documentation, trying to understand the system's architecture. Tommy had even written a script to automate the custodian responses, only to discover that each signature required a physical token, a secure USB key that I'd turned in with my badge. That key was now locked in the security office, and even if they had it, it was biometrically linked to me. My thumbprint, my retinal scan, my specific typing pattern. The federal government didn't just verify identity, they verified humanity. No automation, no substitution, no delegation. At 10:15, the Treasury Department escalated from notices to warnings. Failure to maintain custodian continuity may result in immediate contract suspension. The email read, it was signed by someone 3 levels above Sarah Martinez. Marcus made the call everyone knew was coming, but no one wanted to suggest, "We need to call Rachel." The room went silent. Lisa said even the air conditioning seemed to pause. "She won't come back," Ethan said flatly. I know her type, bitter, resistant to change. You don't know anything, Marcus cut him off. Rachel Dawson saved this company 16 times that I can personally count. She's not bitter, she's professional. And right now, she's our only hope. They called my personal cell at 11:23. I let it go to voicemail. Marcus called next, then Claire, then surprisingly, Jonathan Hale himself, all voicemail. I wasn't being petty, okay? Not entirely. I was at a job interview across town, discussing a position with a credit union that needed someone to build their compliance infrastructure from scratch. They were offering 20% more than Northbridge had ever paid me. The interview ran until 1 p.m. When I checked my phone afterward, there were 18 more missed calls and a text from Jonathan that simply read, "Please, let's talk." By 2 p.m., the dam began to crack. The Department of Defense had moved from warnings to actions, temporarily freezing 2 active contracts worth $60 million combined. The freeze was reversible if custodian credentials were provided within 24 hours. The countdown timer in my mind matched the one in the system 17 hours until complete lockdown. Claire Bennett, lawyer extraordinaire, tried one last gambit. She contacted the Federal Compliance Oversight Board directly, requesting an emergency custodian transfer. The response was swift and brutal. Emergency transfers require the current custodian's authorization. Please have Ms. Dawson submit Form FSC 447B with her biometric verification. They'd need me to come in, log into the system with my biometrics, and formally transfer authority, except my credentials had already been revoked. By me, legally, properly, and completely. It was a perfect catch-22, and I'd designed it that way, not out of malice, but out of an abundance of caution. I'd seen too many companies try to quickly shuffle critical roles without proper documentation. The federal government had too, which is why the regulations were written in blood and enforced in steel. At 4:30, Lisa sent her last text of the day. Ethan's been locked in Jonathan's office for an hour. Security is packing up his desk, but it doesn't matter, does it? Even if they fire him, it won't fix this. She was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. If it ever really was, this was about consequences, about the price of dismissing expertise, of confusing quiet competence with replaceable commodity. They'd wanted to see if the system could run without me. In 13 hours, they'd have their answer. Thursday morning, 3:17 a.m. I was awake, not from anxiety but from habit. This was the hour I'd usually check the overnight sync logs, ensuring our Asian Pacific operations had properly updated the federal databases. Old habits die hard, even when you've burned the bridge they lived on. My laptop showed the news I'd been expecting. Tech blogs had picked up the story. Major federal contractor faces system crisis, read one headline. Another was more direct, Northbridge Solutions contracts in jeopardy. After it meltdown. None of them had the real story yet. Just speculation about ransomware or cyber attacks. The truth was far more mundane and far more damaging. At 6 a.m. sharp, I composed a single email, not to Northbridge, but to Sarah Martinez at the Federal Compliance Oversight Board. Subject line, clarification on Northbridge situation. Dear Sarah, to prevent any misconceptions, I want to clarify that I have not sabotaged, hacked, or otherwise maliciously interfered with Northbridge Solutions systems. I properly revoked my custodian credentials following my termination, as required by federal protocol. The fail-safe custodian protocol is functioning exactly as designed and documented. All system documentation, passwords, and procedures remain with the company. The current situation results from their failure to ensure proper custodian succession before terminating my position. I am not seeking reinstatement and have already accepted a position elsewhere. This email is solely to ensure accurate understanding of the situation for federal records. Regards, Rachel Dawson. Send. Within minutes, Sarah replied. Understood. For the record, you followed protocol perfectly. What happens next is not your responsibility. That absolution, bureaucratic as it was, felt like vindication. I wasn't a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. I was a professional who'd followed the rules while everyone else had ignored them. By 7 a.m., the countdown had reached its final hours. According to insider tech forums, Northbridge's building was in full crisis mode. Every developer, every IT staff member, everyone who'd ever written a line of code had been called in. They were attempting what Tommy had started trying to build: a bypass, a workaround, anything to keep the data flowing. But the compliance core wasn't just software, it was a reflection of federal bureaucracy itself. Every attempted bypass triggered more security protocols. Every workaround created new audit flags. The system was designed to fail safely, and that's exactly what it was doing, failing so safely that nothing could move. At 8:45, my phone rang with a blocked number. I knew who it would be before I answered. "Rachel." Jonathan Hale's voice was hoarse, exhausted. "Please don't hang up." "I'm listening," I said, pouring my morning coffee with my free hand. "We need you. I need you. The company needs you." The company made its position clear on Monday. Ethan Brooks has been terminated, effective immediately, full severance to avoid lawsuits, but he's gone. I almost felt sorry for Ethan. Almost. That doesn't solve your problem. "Jonathan." "I know. The federal boards won't accept a new custodian without your authorization, but you've revoked your own credentials. Claire says it's an impossible loop." "It's not impossible," I said, taking a sip of perfectly brewed dark roast. "It just takes time, 6 months, according to the federal guidelines." "We don't have 6 months. We don't have 6 hours." His voice cracked. "The DoD is threatening to pull everything. Treasury's frozen our payments. We'll be in breach by noon." "I'm aware." Silence stretched between us. I could hear his breathing, rapid and shallow. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Name it, salary, position, anything." "I wanted respect," I said simply. "I wanted 15 years of dedication to mean something. I wanted my expertise valued, not dismissed. But that window closed when Ethan called me replaceable and you let him." "I didn't know." "You didn't care to know. How many times did I send you documentation about the custodian protocol? How many warnings about single points of failure? You signed off on every report without reading them." More silence. In the background, I could hear voices shouting, phones ringing, the sound of a company dying in real time. "There has to be something," he said desperately. "Some way to fix this." I looked at my laptop screen, at the countdown timer I'd been watching: 03:14:27. "There is one possibility," I said slowly, "but it's not a guarantee." "Anything." "The emergency custodian provision in subsection 43. If a custodian becomes medically incapacitated, there's a process for emergency transfer. It requires the custodian's biometric data from before the incapacitation, a medical certificate, and board approval." "But you're not incapacitated." "No, but my credentials are... They're in a legal limbo, revoked but not replaced. Claire might be able to argue that as a form of technical incapacitation. The board might accept it if you can provide my last biometric scan from Monday morning's security log, plus a statement that I was terminated without succession planning." It was a long shot, and we both knew it, but it was something. "Even if it works," I continued, "you'll need someone with existing federal clearance to take over immediately. The background check alone..." "Marcus has clearance," Jonathan interrupted. "Secret level, from his military days." Of course he did. Marcus was competent, thorough, everything Ethan hadn't been. "Then you have 3 hours to convince the federal board that a terminated employee's revoked credentials constitute technical incapacitation," I said. "Good luck, Jonathan." "Rachel, wait, if this works, would you consider..." "No," I cut him off. "I'll send Claire the technical documentation she needs for the appeal. That's my professional courtesy for 15 years. After that, we're done." "I understand," he said quietly. "And Rachel, I'm sorry. Truly." "I know," I said, and meant it. But sorry doesn't restore trust any more than a new custodian can instantly restore federal compliance. I hung up and opened my laptop. pulling up the emergency provision documentation. It would take Claire's legal brilliance and a sympathetic federal board, but it might work, barely, just enough to keep Northbridge alive, wounded but breathing. At 9:12 a.m., the timer read 0000. The compliance core entered full protective mode, every connection severed, every process frozen, every byte of federal data locked behind walls of regulation and protocol. Somewhere in a glass tower, $240 million in contracts held their breath, waiting to see if a brilliant lawyer could convince the federal government that technical death counted as incapacitation, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is dismiss the person who holds the keys to your kingdom. I closed my laptop and prepared for my first day at the credit union tomorrow. Whatever happened to Northbridge now, it was no longer my system to save. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. I wasn't there, of course, but Lisa had hidden in the supply closet next to the main conference room. 15 years of friendship bought that kind of loyalty. She texted me everything. Her messages a play-by-play of corporate desperation. "Jonathan just walked in," she wrote. "He looks like he aged 10 years overnight." The board had assembled in full force 7 members who usually only appeared via video link for quarterly reports. Today, they were all physically present, their collective net worth sitting around a table trying to understand how one person's termination could threaten everything. "The DoD just sent a formal breach notice," Lisa texted at 10:07. "Claire's literally running down the hall with papers." I could picture it perfectly. Claire Bennett, usually composed to the point of being robotic, sprinting in her Louboutins with my emergency provision documentation clutched in her manicured hands. She'd have maybe 3 minutes to present the legal argument of her career. The boardroom door flew open. Lisa said it actually hit the wall, and Jonathan Hale stood there, his tie askew, his face flushed with exertion and fury, but it wasn't directed at the board. His eyes swept the room, past the executives, past the lawyers, past everyone until they landed on the one person he was looking for. Except I wasn't there. "Where is she?" The words exploded from him, loud enough that Lisa jumped in her hiding spot. "Where is Rachel Dawson?" Board members shifted uncomfortably. Someone Lisa thought it was the CFO quietly said, "She was terminated on Monday. Jonathan, you signed the approval." "I signed what Ethan Brooks put in front of me," Jonathan snarled. "I trusted him to handle operations. I trusted all of you to know the difference between redundancy and catastrophe." Marcus Hill stood up, tablet in hand. "Sir, we have 17 minutes before the Treasury Department makes their suspension permanent. If we can't provide custodian credentials—" "We can't provide them," Jonathan's voice cracked. "Don't you understand? She designed the system to be bulletproof, and we just shot ourselves with our own security." Claire burst through the door, breathing hard. "I filed the emergency provision request," she announced. "The federal board is reviewing it now, but—" she paused, choosing her words carefully. "They want to speak with Rachel directly." "She won't answer," someone said. Lisa identified him as Richard Wong, head of HR. "We've called 50 times. 63, Marcus corrected. "I've been counting." Jonathan turned to Claire. "What exactly do they want from her?" "Confirmation that she didn't maliciously cause this, that she followed proper protocol, that she's not holding the system hostage for ransom or reinstatement." "She sent them an email this morning," Marcus said, pulling it up on his tablet. "Sarah Martinez at the federal board forwarded it to me. Rachel explicitly stated she followed protocol and isn't seeking reinstatement." "That's not enough," Claire said. "They want verbal confirmation. They want to hear her say it." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the position they were in. They needed help from the person they'd publicly humiliated, dismissed as replaceable, thrown away like obsolete hardware. "I'll call her," Jonathan said quietly. "On speaker. All of you need to hear this." He dialed my number from his personal phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I let it go to 4 before answering. "Jonathan," I said simply. The room could hear the calm in my voice, the complete absence of panic or concern. "Rachel, you're on speaker. The board is here. Along with Claire, Marcus, and others, the Federal Compliance Board needs verbal confirmation from you about the situation. I see. And what situation would that be? Lisa said Jonathan's jaw clenched visibly. The complete shutdown of our federal compliance system, the one that's about to cost us everything. That situation. The one where you discovered that 15 years of specialized knowledge isn't actually replaceable by an intern. Someone Lisa thought it was a board member audibly winced. Rachel, Claire interjected, her lawyer voice steady. The federal board needs to know, did you follow proper protocols when revoking your custodian credentials? Yes, FSC 2018-447 subsection 12. Proper revocation upon termination of employment. It's all documented. And you're not seeking reinstatement or holding the system for ransom. No, I have a new position that values my expertise. I have no interest in returning to a company that considers me redundant. The word redundant hung in the air like an accusation. But you sent Claire the emergency provision documentation, Marcus said hopefully. Professional courtesy. 15 years earned that much. Jonathan leaned closer to the phone. Rachel, I need to apologize. No, I cut him off. You need to explain to your board how you let a middle manager with 3 weeks of experience fire the person holding the keys to $250 million in federal contracts. That's what you need to do. Board members exchanged glances. Lisa said one of them elderly. Distinguished spoke up. Ms. Dawson, Thomas Bradfield here. I've reviewed your personnel file. Exemplary service, multiple commendations, critical saves. How did we get here? Ask the man who called me replaceable, Mr. Bradfield. Oh wait, you can't. You fired him yesterday. 36 hours too late. What would it take? Bradfield started. Nothing, I said firmly. There's nothing you could offer that would make me come back. But if Claire's emergency provision works, if Marcus can take over as custodian, you might salvage something. He's competent, thorough, and actually understands the value of documentation. Listen to him. Read the reports people send you, and maybe, just maybe, learn that lean operations shouldn't mean cutting the rope you're hanging from. The federal board is calling, Claire announced urgently, checking her phone. They've made a decision. Then I suggest you take it, I said. This will be our last conversation. Jonathan, Marcus, Claire, you were decent to work with when you bothered to notice I existed. The rest of you, I hope this has been educational. Rachel, Jonathan started. Goodbye. Northbridge. I hung up. Lisa texted me 30 seconds later. Federal Board approved emergency provision. Marcus is interim custodian pending full verification. Systems coming back online. You saved them. No, I texted back. I gave them the rope. They saved themselves. Barely. The news would report it as a technical glitch resolved through emergency federal intervention. Northbridge would survive, wounded and weakened, but alive. They'd lost 2 contracts in the chaos. About $40 million gone forever. The rest would be under enhanced scrutiny for the next year. And somewhere in a gleaming conference room, 7 board members were learning that some employees aren't just cogs in the machine. They are the machine. And when you throw them away, sometimes the whole thing comes crashing down. The Federal Compliance Board approved the emergency provision at 10:43 a.m. By 11, Marcus had his interim credentials activated. By noon, the systems were slowly coming back online, like a massive ship changing course 1 degree at a time. But the damage was done. $40 million in lost contracts, another $60 million under review, and a reputation that would take years to rebuild. I was sitting in a small cafe 3 blocks from my new office, enjoying a late breakfast and freedom from 2 a.m. emergency calls, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Northbridge Solutions stock plummets 32% after federal contract suspension. The market had rendered its verdict. In 4 days, the company had lost more value than they'd saved by eliminating my salary for the next decade. The mathematics of arrogance had balanced perfectly. Lisa met me for coffee that afternoon, her face a mixture of exhaustion and awe. The aftermath is incredible, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Every department is now required to document their single points of failure. Every critical system needs 3 trained backups. Jonathan personally reviews every termination of anyone who's been there over 5 years. Too little, too late, I said, stirring my cappuccino. Maybe. But Tommy and Melissa remember them, the interns Ethan brought in. They're being mentored by Marcus now. He's making them read every page of your documentation. Tommy actually said your code comments are like reading poetry written by someone who's seen hell and decided to leave excellent directions. I laughed, genuinely amused. They'll do fine if they remember one thing: the system doesn't care about your ego. It only cares about compliance. Speaking of which, Lisa leaned in conspiratorially. Claire found something interesting in Ethan's emails. He'd been planning to outsource the entire compliance system to an offshore firm he had financial stakes in. Your termination was just the first step. The final piece clicked into place. It had never been about my salary or modernization. It had been about Ethan enriching himself at the company's expense. He'd just chosen the wrong system to pillage. Where is he now? I asked, though I didn't really care. Last I heard, he was trying to explain to potential employers why his 3-week tenure ended with $100 million losses. Good luck with that. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Lisa asked the question I knew was coming. Any regrets? I thought about it seriously. About 15 years of 60-hour weeks, of building something from nothing, of being the invisible foundation that held everything together, about the pride I'd taken in never failing an audit, never missing a deadline, never letting the company down. No, I said finally. I regret that it ended this way, but I don't regret protecting myself. I documented everything, followed every protocol, gave them every opportunity to treat me as valuable. They chose not to. The consequences were theirs to bear. And now I build something new. The credit union is giving me carte blanche to design their federal compliance system from scratch. Better pay, better hours, and a CEO who actually reads technical reports. Lisa raised her coffee cup. To knowing your worth. To systems that fail safely, I countered, clinking my cup against hers. That was 3 months ago. Northbridge survived. Scarred but functional. Marcus successfully completed his full custodian certification last week. Lisa sent me a photo of the team celebrating. A cake with no single points of failure written in frosting. Jonathan Hale personally sent me a LinkedIn message congratulating me on my new position. I didn't respond, but I appreciated the gesture. The credit union system went live yesterday. Clean, efficient, with triple redundancy and 4 trained custodians. No heroes, no irreplaceable individuals, no ticking time bombs, just solid, boring, bulletproof compliance. Sometimes, late at night, I get emails from recruiters, from companies who heard whispers about what really happened at Northbridge. They offer astronomical salaries, signing bonuses, whatever it takes to get someone who understands that in the world of federal compliance, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. I delete them all. I've learned my worth. And more importantly, I've learned that any company that doesn't recognize it from day 1 doesn't deserve it at day 5,000. The compliance core still runs at Northbridge, now managed by a team of 8 where 1 person used to suffice. The federal contracts flow, the audits pass, the data syncs properly. But everyone who works there knows the story, whispered in break rooms and over drinks the week the system almost died. When 1 person's absence brought a giant to its knees, when 15 years of expertise walked out the door and nearly took everything with it. They call it the custodian crisis in business schools now, a case study in critical knowledge management. But I call it something simpler the week they learned that some things can't be optimized, some people can't be replaced, and some bridges, once burned, light up the whole sky as they fall. My phone buzzes a text from Tommy, the former intern, now a junior system administrator. Ms. Dawson, I just wanted you to know I read all your documentation, every line. You saved us even after they threw you away. That's the kind of professional I want to be. I smile and type back, then remember this document everything. Value yourself, and never ever let them call you redundant. Because in the end, that's what this was really about, not revenge, not anger, not even justice. It was about proof. Proof that expertise matters, that institutional knowledge has value, that the people who keep the lights on deserve more than a pink slip and a patronizing dismissal. The coffee shop is closing now, Seattle rain pattering against the windows. Somewhere across the city, in a climate-controlled server room, the compliance core hums along, tended by people who now understand its worth. And me. I'm going home to a life where my phone doesn't ring at 3 a.m., where my expertise is valued, where I'm not a single point of failure, but part of a team that understands systems are only as strong as the people who build them. Some might call what happened revenge. I call it inevitable. When you build your castle on one person's shoulders and then kick them out from under you, don't be surprised when the whole thing comes crashing down. The only surprise is that they were surprised at all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect if you enjoyed this tale of office justice. Please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? Let me know your story.